All right, Friday, 1 o'clock. So let's get settled in here and get some Latin studies done. Friday, 1 o'clock, March 10th. Just buzzing our way through March here. Latin grammar and reading studies here. So make sure you're here for the right class. That's what we're going to be talking about. And I just want to make sure everyone gets settled in. Give me a wave if you can hear me okay. Everything loud and clear? Good, thank you. Okay, so we're going to get started here. Latin grammar and reading. And I don't know, this is like our 5th or 6th class. I'm not sure, but I hope that you have been able to find recordings of these videos. I'm actually going to be changing the place where I host all these videos because I really don't like YouTube too much. There's too much junk on YouTube, and to post lesson videos and then have all of these links all over the place to other videos and stuff like that, I really don't want to do that for students. So you're going to notice that the videos look a little different in the future because I'm moving them to a better platform, a better program for us to use for our studies. So anyway, today we're going to continue the study of the accidents of the parts of speech. And I know this may not sound very exciting to talk about the accidents of the parts of speech, but as we continue to get through it and you learn how helpful this teaching is that comes from this textbook that we study in our Latin grammar course, it's going to begin to make the Latin language really easier for you to read and understand. And so you may think it's boring because it's just a bunch of grammar studies. No one ever pursued the study of grammar for entertainment, after all. You don't see any video games coming out, on Latin grammar. So there's no stadiums filled with people gathering together to chant Latin grammar forms and things like that. It's grammar work, it's study. It's boring by nature and difficult. Because all arts that need to be learned are difficult. And that's why those who learn those arts are so fortunate, because they end up with a skill that very few people have. And that's what actually makes that skill useful to make a living and do things like that. So we're going to continue our study of the accidents of the Latin grammar. The first week, let's just share my screen here and we'll walk through this together so you can see. Let's start with a little quick review, and then we'll get into the new stuff. So just zinging back up to the top here. We learned that there are 8 parts of speech. We talked about the 8 parts of speech: noun, pronoun, verb, participle, and so on. And then in lesson 3 of Latin grammar, we learned that there are certain things which accompany or happen to the parts of speech. Certain things that happen to the parts of speech. And we had this list. I think there were 10 things. Number, case, gender, declension, conjugation, mood, tense, person, figure, and species. So we've got these 10 different things that happen to the parts of speech, and they don't all happen to all of the parts of speech. So we have to learn what they are and when they're important. But we learned that there are 10 basic things that happen to the parts of speech in Latin. And once we've learned the 8 parts of speech, and once we're able to identify words and point out nouns and pronouns and participles and verbs and conjunctions and so on, then we need to learn to understand what the characteristics of those parts of speech are, because that will allow us to know a lot about each word, even when we meet with that word for the first time. And that's how we study for mastery. We seek to understand general things and then apply those general things to specific things that are new, usually that are unknown. That's how wise people study things, and that's how we're studying language. So we learn that there are 8 parts of speech. We learn that there are 10 things that happen to the parts of speech, 10 accidents. And then we started to study those accidents of the parts of speech. In our first lesson, we learned about the number of nouns, pronouns, and verbs and participles, about number, and that's very simple. It's just singular and plural. Usually students have no problem with that. But what's important is we learn that number, singular and plural, is shown by the different forms of the words. So a singular noun and the same noun in the plural will have different forms. And so there are signs for us in the Latin language that tell us, hey, this is a single thing, or this is a group of things, a multitude. So we learned about number. Then we went on and we learned about case. We learned that in Latin, there are 6 different cases in Latin: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, vocative, and ablative. We talked about what the different meanings and uses of those different cases are and why they're used, how they're used to show that words have different meanings or functions in a sentence. So we talked about the 6 cases in Latin. Then we went on last week, in our meeting last week, we talked about gender, and that's a pretty lengthy lesson. You can see it's broken up into a number of parts. Here we have Rule 15A, which is the first part. Then we've got 15B, which is the second part. Then there's 15C, the third part, and 15D, the fourth part. So actually 4 parts of the lesson on gender. We learned that there are 3 principal genders, or 3 primary genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. And then we learned that there are other genders that are a combination of these, different combinations of these for different words that have different meanings, where they might have 2 genders, they might only have 1 gender, and then some screwy things like we saw with the epicene and the doubtful genders. So we talked about gender, and there's a lot there. You can go back and watch that video if you'd like to review that, or just read through the lesson as you study it on your own. But I think we've covered gender pretty well. And today what I'd like to do is get into declensions. So this is the next part of this lesson, starting in rule number 16 here. So we're going to talk about declension today. Declension. The declension of nouns, pronouns, and participles. So only 3 of the parts of speech have declension: nouns, pronouns, and participles. All right. And we're going to talk about 5 declensions. So first of all, what is a declension? Let's talk about what a declension is. When we first started with grammar, I said, if we want to learn a language, if you think about your little brother or sister, if you've got a little 2 or 3-year-old brother running around the house, think about what that little kid has to learn with respect to language. It's really pretty challenging. There are thousands and thousands of words that we need to learn, and you guys take it for granted that you just know thousands of words. You talk every day, you read things, you watch shows, you listen to music, you talk to your parents or friends or whoever. You know thousands and thousands of words just because your brain is like a magnet that picks all of this stuff up, and you've just memorized over the years of your life. You've memorized thousands and thousands of words for things, all kinds of words: nouns, pronouns, verbs, participles, conjunctions, everything. You've learned thousands of words just by being alive, because your mind, by reason, memorizes and records things and puts ideas together and so on. You're just a memory machine by nature. You've learned thousands of words, but that doesn't make you educated. That doesn't make you intelligent. In order to become educated, you have to study the arts and sciences, to take all of that jumbled gobbledygook information in your head that you just pick up all over the place and begin to organize it and to arrange it and to make it clearer and more accurate, because a lot of it, even though it's pretty good, isn't really accurate. You've got all kinds of ideas in your head that are half true, half false, confused, not exactly accurate, and so on. And so what it means to be educated in the real sense, not to have a high school diploma or to have a college degree, because you can get those things without being well educated. To be educated means that you work to organize and clean up all of that information in your head. And I'll give you a good example. If you have a regular computer, not like a Chromebook, because on a Chromebook, we really don't store any files, but if you've got a desktop computer, you know that all kinds of stuff gets into that computer, and you've got thousands and thousands of files and pictures and songs and documents and all kinds of stuff in that computer. That computer is like your mind. There's just all kinds of stuff saved in that computer. And once in a while, you need to go through and you need to clean it all up. You need to organize it into folders. You need to put things where they belong. Sometimes you need to choose to delete some things, but it takes time to organize all of the content, all of the information in your computer. Sometimes people don't do that at all, and they just have this big mess of stuff and they just search for whatever they need. But if you're responsible in using your computer, you'll take time to organize it, clean up all the files and folders, put things where they belong, and so on. Same thing is true with papers, with your schoolwork. You could be the kind of person who just has papers all over the place, and it's like, it's kind of like the thoughts in your mind, just all of this stuff, all of these books and papers and things collected all over the place, just piled up with no order or arrangement. And you can even say, oh, it's okay because I know where things are, but you don't really know where things are. You've got to dig for them whenever you need them. So that's how our minds are, just full of all kinds of stuff, lots and lots of stuff, but it's disorganized, it's inaccurate, it's difficult to use, and so on. So when we study, when we get a real education, we try to organize our minds. We try to get them very orderly and efficient so we can find things easily. Everything is accurate and clear, and that's what gives us the benefits of a good education. So what we're trying to do here is take all of these words, all of these ideas, these thousands and thousands of ideas and words, and we're trying to change our minds and move from just this big clutter box of stuff that we've collected into a nicely organized system of ideas and words. That's really the goal of a good education. So when we talked about the parts of speech, we took all of these thousands of words and we said, okay, there's going to be 8 different folders, and we're going to put all these words in these 8 different folders. And that helped us out. That got things organized. And then we said, okay, now inside these folders, we need to organize these different words in the parts of speech. So if we have nouns, we've just got a big mess of nouns all thrown into the nouns folder. Well, we've got to organize that a little bit because we can organize all the nouns. And if we were to ask, well, how can we start to organize the nouns? How can we organize all of these nouns and pronouns and participles? Well, we can organize them into groups or families, because if we look at them, we'll notice that they have some things in common. So we want to understand, how can we organize nouns and pronouns and participles so that we can start to make an orderly sense of these different parts of speech. And the way that we're going to organize them is by grouping them into families based on their endings, based on their forms, okay? So we're going to organize nouns into groups based on the forms that they use, the endings that they use, because again, even if we look at all these Latin words and there's thousands and thousands of different words, we'll start to notice patterns. We'll start to see that some things are the same, and we'll start to see that there's an order to all these words. It's not all of this craziness like it first looks like when you start Latin reading. We can see there's some order here, and we've got to identify that order, and then we've got to organize everything according to that order. So what we're going to do today is learn about the different groups or families into which nouns and pronouns and participles can be organized. And these different groups or families are called declensions, okay? Declensions. They're groups that we can organize nouns into, groups we can organize pronouns into, groups we can organize participles into, and make order out of these thousands and thousands of nouns that we're going to see. So what we have to learn is what the names of these different groups are. That's the easy part. And then we have to know how they're identified. How do we actually know which group a noun belongs to? So we've got two important things to learn: what the names of the groups are and how to identify the nouns or the pronouns or whatever that belong in the different groups. So that's what we're going to study here. That's what we study here in this rule number 16. And remember, the name of these groups is declensions in Latin, okay? Declensions. Now the name, excuse me, the name of the groups is easy. It's very easy. In Latin, there are 5 groups. There are 5 groups, let's say, of nouns in Latin, and their names are very easy to learn. But you need to pay attention because this is really, really complicated. The first declension, the first group, is called the first declension. That's its name. And the second group is called the second declension. That's its name. And then the third group is called the third declension. The fourth group is called the fourth declension. And the fifth group is named the fifth declension. So you can see that the names of these groups is really complicated: first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So we've got these 5 groups. Very easy to think about. All nouns can be divided into these 5 groups, okay? But how can we figure out which group each noun belongs to? Well, there's a certain formula for it, and that's what we learn here in this rule. So we've got the Latin here, and just for the sake of hearing it, let me read this rule to you in Latin, and then we'll translate it and talk about its meaning. So pay attention to this Latin rule, okay? This is rule number 16 in Latin Grammar 1. Declinationes, that's the word for declensions. Declinationes sive formae nominum sunt quinque. Prima, cuius genitivus singularis terminator in ae diphthongo, ut musa, musae. Secunda, cuius genitivus terminator littera I, ut dominus, domini. Tertia, cuius genitivus terminator syllaba is, ut sermo, sermonis. Quarta, cuius genitivus terminator syllaba us, ut sensus, sensus. Quinta, cuius genitivus terminator litteris e et I separatis, ut dies, dei. So that's the rule there in Latin, and it translates as we have written down here. So we have 5 declensions, and this rule here, number 16, tells us how to identify the 5 declensions of nouns. To organize all of the nouns, it gives us a very simple rule. So let's walk through this. The declensions or forms of nouns are 5. So there are 5 declensions. The first declension, and it tells us that this is how we identify the first declension, whose genitive singular is ended with the diphthong a. So how do we know that a noun belongs to the first declension? Its genitive singular form ends in the diphthong a in Latin. That's how we identify that family of nouns, okay? The genitive singular form. Now let me ask you, and you can chat this. Does the nominative form of a noun identify the declension it belongs to? Yes or no? Does the nominative form identify the declension? Yes or no? No, it doesn't. So if you look a word up in a dictionary, if you look a noun up in the dictionary and you look at its nominative form, that does not tell you what declension it belongs to. And sometimes students will think that it does. They'll say, oh, well, if a noun ends in a, then it's first declension. That is not true. And you'll learn that that's not true. The rule for identifying the declension is to look at the genitive singular form of a noun. That's where we learn what declension or what family the noun belongs to. So for the first declension, And if you can see my screen, I don't know if you can see me in the video, but I've got these written behind me. Probably too small for you, but the first declension is recognized because its genitive singular ends in AE. Okay, that's the first declension. And we're given an example. The Latin noun musa, if you look up the Latin noun musa, you'll find that the genitive singular form is musai, and that's how we know that musa is a first declension noun. Musa is first declension, not because it ends in A, that doesn't mean anything. Musa is first declension because the genitive singular form ends in AE, okay? Then we've got the second declension, a second group of nouns. The genitive of the second declension is terminated with the letter E in Latin or I in English. So if it ends in the genitive singular, if it ends in I, it's a second declension noun. And we have an example given to us here of dominus. The Latin noun dominus, the ending us doesn't mean anything. We don't care about the nominative form. But if we look at the genitive singular form, we see that it ends in the letter I, the English letter I. That's how we know it's a second declension noun. So we stick the noun dominus in the second declension folder. We organize them. Musa goes in the first folder, dominus goes in the second folder. They're both nouns, but they're two different kinds of nouns. One is first declension, one is second declension. The third declension has a genitive case terminated with the syllable is. So the third declension, the third group of nouns, is identified when we see that the genitive singular ending is is. And we're given an example here, sermo, which means speech or a word. Sermo, that's meaningless. We don't know what declension it belongs to because of its nominative form. But if we look at the genitive singular form, we find sermonis, we find that it ends in is, in the genitive singular. That's how we know that sermo belongs in the third folder, the third group of nouns, because its genitive singular ends in is. So that's 3 so far. The first declension ends in AE in the genitive singular. The second declension ends in I in the genitive singular. And the third declension ends in IS in the genitive singular. The fourth declension has a genitive singular ending with the syllable US. US. So if the genitive singular ends in us, then that noun is a fourth declension noun. And I want to show you something. I'm going to type it in the chat here. Look at these two nouns. I'm going to type them and send them by chat. We have dominus and sensus. If you look at these two words, they have the same ending in their nominative cases, dominus and sensus. They both end in us. This is why looking at the nominative form does not tell us what declension a noun belongs to, because we can have nouns that have the same endings in other cases, but they belong to different groups. So the only case that matters, the only form that matters for identifying the declension of a noun is the genitive singular case. If I type the genitive singular forms of these two nouns, you'll see how it's different. Okay. So if I type the genitive forms, the genitive singular form of dominus is domini. And the genitive singular form of sensus is sensus again. So there we can see that these nouns are different, even though in the nominative case, they look exactly the same. That's why you can't take a guess by looking at a noun and trying to think what declension it might be, because you'll make lots of errors like that. The only way that you can know is by learning what the genitive singular ending is for that noun, because that's the sign of the declension that it belongs to. So for the fourth declension, the sign is the ending us, the genitive singular ending us. And then lastly, the fifth declension the genitive singular ends with the letters E and I, EI. And we're given an example here, dies, which means day in Latin, dies, the genitive singular is diei, diei. Okay, it ends in EI. That's the fifth declension. And again, you have to be careful because look at these two nouns. You have to make sure you know this because if you look at the chat real quick, you'll see that domini ends in an I in its second declension. But diei, if you don't know the grammar, you might look at that and say, oh, it ends in I. It must be second declension. But no, it ends in EI. That's fifth declension. Okay, so you've got to be careful and make sure you know the signs of the 5 declensions. And that's really it. There's 5 declensions, and you need to know the 5 signs for the 5 declensions. You have to look at the genitive singular ending, and if you know the 5 declensions and what ending belongs to each declension, you can then organize all the nouns into the right folder, put them in the right declension by looking at the genitive singular form. Now, the question you should be asking, if you're an honest student, you should be asking, I wasn't born into this world knowing the genitive singular endings of Latin nouns. So how in the world is that going to help me, right? How is it going to help me to tell me that I need to use the genitive singular ending of a word to tell which declension it belongs to when I have no idea what the genitive singular ending of different nouns is? Well, that's the challenge we've got to overcome. We've got to figure out how to figure out what the genitive singular ending is so that we can know what declension a noun belongs to. And fortunately, any good Latin dictionary will show you this. Okay, so if you look a word up in a dictionary, in a Latin dictionary, it will give you the nominative form, which is the basic form of the noun, but then it will also tell you what the genitive singular form is, because the dictionary writers know that you need to know that in order to figure out what declension it belongs to. So in the lesson, I give you an example of what a dictionary entry looks like for a Latin word. And if you're wondering, what kind of Latin dictionary do I use? It's this guy right here. It's Elementary Latin Dictionary, published by Oxford Press. It's this big fat, I guess a short fat blue dictionary. These things are expensive though, so I don't necessarily recommend this one because this will probably cost like 60 or 70 bucks, and you can get cheaper ones. But that picture in the lesson is coming out of this Elementary Latin Dictionary. You can also get this dictionary online. You can go on archive.org or Google Books, and you can find a PDF copy of this same dictionary. If you want to know what to look for, the author of this dictionary, and I'll stick it up in front of the camera here. The author of this dictionary is a Latin master named Charlton Lewis. Charlton Lewis. So if you go to archive.org or Google Books, you can find an old PDF copy of this same dictionary and save yourself $1 million. So I'd recommend that. You can also use online dictionaries. I showed you Whitaker's Words last week, which is a useful tool. And let me show you that again real quick. Give me 1 second here. Just a second. Let me pull up Whitaker's Words, and I will show you how you can find the genitive singular form in Whitaker's Words. 1 second here. Let me find it. Just a second. Okay, you should be able to see this. So this is an online little Latin dictionary tool called Whitaker's Words. I showed you this last week. But if I look up a word like dominus, okay, if I look up dominus, down here, you'll see it tells me the nominative form. Maybe I should zoom in a little bit for you guys so you don't go blind. If you see down here, it tells you the nominative form is dominus, and it tells you the genitive form is domini. So it tells you the genitive singular form because it knows that you need to know that to identify the declension. But then it also tells you the declension, so it kind of cheats for you. And then it gives you the meanings and all that stuff. So any good Latin dictionary will tell you the nominative form of the word and the genitive singular form, because it knows you need to know that to identify the declension. And you can see I put some notes on here. So the dictionary tells us the nominative form. Sometimes it just gives us the genitive ending, because that's all we really need to know. And then it also tells us the gender. So you can find the genitive singular form of a noun in a dictionary. Okay, you can find the genitive singular form of any noun in a dictionary. So that's how you would figure that out. All right, so once you know that genitive singular form, that ending, then you know what group that noun belongs to. And later on, we'll see why that's important, because for each of these groups, for each declension, they have a whole different set of endings. Make sure you pay attention to me here. Just to answer that question about Greek class, it's going to start the week of March 21st. So if you look on a calendar and find the week where March 21st is, that week is when the new live classes are going to start. Okay, so I think it's 2 weeks, another week and a half from today. Okay, so if you look in a dictionary, you find the genitive singular form, that tells you what declension, and the reason why that's important is because each declension has different endings for all of the cases. And so we're going to have to memorize all of the forms for the first declension, all of the forms for the second declension, all the forms for the third declension, and the fourth declension, and the fifth declension. And so you won't be able to know which forms to use until you know which declension the noun belongs to, and then you'll use those endings for that noun. The same is true when you're reading and you see a word in Latin. You might not know how to translate that word until you figure out what declension it belongs to. And I'll show you why. Look at the chat real quick. If I have these two words, dominis and sermonis, and you saw them in Latin reading, if you were reading, let's say, a Bible passage, and you saw these two words, dominis and sermonis, you might see them and think, oh, look, they've got the same endings, but they don't have the same endings. They don't have the same endings because dominis comes from the noun dominus, which is a second declension noun. And that ending is a dative or ablative plural ending. So it's going to be translated like a dative case or like an ablative case. But sermonis, the is ending, sermonis is a third declension noun, and it's in the genitive case. So it's going to be translated like a genitive. So even though those two words look like they have the same ending, they're actually from two different declensions, and those endings mean different things in different declensions. So this helps us with translation, and you really can't translate until you know the declensions of the noun. So you can't just look at the endings and start guessing. You actually have to know the grammar in order to figure out what's going on so you can make a good translation, okay? So we've got 5 declensions of nouns. You need to know what the 5 declensions are, and you need to know how to identify each of the 5 declensions of noun. And then you have to practice doing that. You have to practice finding a noun, figuring out what declension it belongs to, and get comfortable doing that. And after a while, you'll start to be able to do it pretty quickly, okay? So that's what declensions are. 5 declensions. Genitive singular ending tells us what declension it belongs to. Then I just summarize that down here in the rule. I say, all that matters is the genitive singular ending. And I give you a quick summary here in the lesson about the 5 genitive singular endings you need to watch out for and how they show us each of the 5 declensions. Now, today, we're not going to get into pronouns and their declensions. We're going to save that for next week, because what I'd like to do is take this knowledge that we have of these 5 declensions and jump into Latin reading and take a look and start identifying the declension of the different nouns that we see in our reading. So let's take a look at the Gospel of St. John together here. And we'll just take some time to look at the nouns and identify which declension they belong to. And I'll help you with this. So I don't expect you to know this, even though some of you might know this. I don't expect you to know this, and I'll help you. So when we look at this Latin reading, when you studied this Latin reading in the Latin reading course, you probably didn't know any of this stuff. And you just followed the translation in the lesson, which is fine. That's what you're supposed to do. But our goal is to move beyond that and start to understand, as we learn grammar, to start to understand why the translation is what it is. So let's just look at these. The first noun we find in this verse in John chapter 1, the first noun is principio, principio. And so what I'll do, let's just do this for the sake of fun. Okay, let's just look up Whitaker's words, and we'll just type this word into the dictionary. And let's just see what we get, okay? When I search principio, I get this. It tells me that principio comes from the noun principium, principium. That doesn't help me identify the gender, though. I mean, the declension. But here it tells me that the genitive singular form is principii, so it ends in I, all right? The noun principium ends in I. So here's my question for you. What declension is the noun principio? What declension is the noun principio? First, second, third, fourth, or fifth? It ends in I in the genitive singular. Very good. It's second declension. Okay, so you can see how I took a form of a noun in the reading. Let's pretend I didn't know what that noun is, so I just look it up. And when I look it up, it tells me that that noun principio comes from the nominative principium, and the genitive singular is principii. So it's a second declension noun. Okay, let's go back to our reading. The next noun that we see is verbum, verbum. And again, if I'm a dodo and I don't know, and I look it up, I find verbum here in the dictionary, and the second form I'm shown is verbi with an I at the end, with an I at the end. Don't worry about the other details here. It gets into some more complicated grammar stuff that we'll talk about that later, some other time, okay? But if you look at the entry for the noun, we see verbum, and then we see verbi. So we're shown that the genitive singular form ends in I. Which declension is verbum? Which declension is verbum? First, second, third, fourth, fifth. Which declension is verbum? It's second declension, okay? And the reason we know that, okay, looks like you've all got that. The reason we know that is because the genitive singular form ends in I. It's very simple. We can use the dictionary to figure that out. So let's go back and take a look. Next, we're going along through here and we find another noun. We find deum. So I hop over to my Latin dictionary. I enter deum in the dictionary, and it tells me that the noun deum comes from the nominative form deus. So it ends in us. The nominative is deus. And it tells me that the genitive singular ending is, this is a little confusing, right? It ends in ei. Now what do I do? It ends in ei. What's the problem here? Why do we have a problem here with the noun deus? What's the problem? Can anybody tell me what the problem is? I look this noun up in the dictionary, and I see that the ending of the genitive singular is ei. What in the world is the problem with this? Based on what we talked about with the 5 declensions, does anybody know what the problem is here? Very good. Pelletier's got it. It looks like the 5th declension, right? it looks like the fifth declension. So how do we know if deus ends in ei or if it ends in I? How can we figure out which declension it is? Well, if we look at the word, and I'll type this for you, if we look at the word deus, we'll see that it's made up of a stem plus an ending. So the stem of this word is actually de. That's the stem of the word. So we're not adding, when we look at that genitive form, we're not adding ei as the ending. The stem is de. So all we're adding is I. So actually the ending of dei, the ending is actually just the letter I. So this is a noun that ends in the genitive singular, it ends in I. So what declension is the noun deum in our reading? What declension? What declension is deum? Second declension, very good. Okay, these have been pretty easy so far. So don't get too cocky because these have been easy ones. Let's find a more difficult one. Let's see. We've got this participle down here, and we haven't looked at participles yet, but they work the same way. We've got this participle, and we see it ends in an A. It's facta, facta. Now, the problem, when you look up facta, watch what happens. Oh, man. We got all kinds of stuff, right? So this word facta can actually be all kinds of different things. It's very complicated. There's all different possibilities. And so there you are, this poor little Latin reading one student, and you look up this word facta in the dictionary, and all of this craziness blows up on the screen. How in the world are we supposed to make any sense out of this? Well, the answer is you really can't yet. Okay, and I want you to see that the grammar sometimes can get very complicated. And as a new student getting started in grammar, well, you're not going to be able to figure this stuff out just yet. But if we were to come back in, let's say 2 years from now, you'd look at this and say, oh yeah, I understand what all that stuff means. It's not complicated. You just haven't studied the grammar yet. But if we look here, what we find, let's just focus on this stuff up here. We find that facta is a participle, and you can see here it says v par, that means participle. Over here you can see ppl, that means participle. So it tells us that facta is a perfect, that means past tense, passive participle, okay? A perfect passive participle. And it tells us it could be all of these different things. And the reason why it could be all of these different things is because if you remember back to our genders, facta is a participle and it's common of 3 genders. So there's masculine forms, feminine forms, and neuter forms. So it gets very confusing and messy. So facta just shows us that this can be pretty complicated, and we're not ready for all that yet. So let's just ignore that for now, okay? Let's go back. So let's leave facta alone. Here we can see factum, so we see another form, but we don't want to worry about that yet. Now, here's another problem. The word nihil is a noun. So what declension is nihil? It's a noun. If we look it up, look what we find here. Nihil is a noun, but it's undeclined. It's undeclined. It's a special kind of noun. The noun nihil doesn't have any forms. It only has one form. It's just a special, or I should say weird, noun. It doesn't have any other forms. It's not declined. So nihil only has one form. So no matter how you use it or where you use it, you just always use the same form. So that's another example of how these studies can get kind of weird, because there are some nouns that are not declined, okay? Nihil is an example. So you just translate it as nothing and try to figure out what the sentence means by translating it as nothing. All right, so there's another problem, nihil. Now we come to an easy one, vita, vita. And if I go to my dictionary and I look up vita, I get this result, okay? Two different options, okay? Vita can be a noun, or it can also be a form of a verb. So we know from our lesson that it's not a verb, so we can ignore that bottom stuff and just focus on this stuff right here. If we look at vita, there's the nominative form, and here we see the genitive form, and we see that it ends in AE. So which declension is vita? Which declension is vita? Very good, first declension. Good, so that's pretty easy. And I think you can see by now how you can simply use a dictionary to figure out the declension. All right, let's just keep going. Next, we have the noun lux. So we've got this noun lux. And if I go to my dictionary and I type in lux, here I'm given the nominative form, which is lux, and then I'm given the genitive form, which is lucis. Lucis. Now, I want you to see something here real quick. When we look at the genitive singular form, this is how we learn the stem of a Latin noun. We don't learn the stem by looking at the nominative form, but when we look at the genitive form, we can see what's actually really going on in this noun. The stem of this word is L-U-C, luc. That's the stem of this word light. And then we have the ending is added on to that stem. The is ending is the genitive singular ending of lux. So what declension is lux? It ends in is in the third declension. Very good. And I appreciate you guys waiting to answer until I ask the question. That's good. Thank you. All right. So lux is third declension. The genitive singular ends in is. Let's keep going. We have hominum. Hominum. And I want you to see hominum ends in um. Verbum ends in deum ends in but these endings have nothing to do with each other. Okay, that's why you can't just look at an ending and guess the declension. They have the same endings, but they're different declensions. And so those endings don't mean the same things. It's not that simple. So if I take the noun hominum and I jump over to my Latin dictionary and I look up hominum, what I find is that hominum comes from the nominative homo, which means man. It really means person. It's just person, male or female. Homo means man. And then I see that the stem of this noun is homin. Homin is the stem, and is the genitive singular ending. So what declension is the noun hominum? What declension is hominum? It's third declension, right? See if you remember, what declension was verbum? What declension was verbum? It ended in just like hominum, but what declension was verbum? It was second declension. So again, you have two words that both end in but that doesn't mean anything. They're different declensions, because all that matters with declension is the genitive singular ending. So don't try to guess based on the ending, because here's an example that you'd be wrong. Hominum comes from the noun homo, and the genitive singular form is hominis, which tells us that it's third declension. All right, let's look at another one. Next, we have this word tenebris. Tenebris. So if I take the word tenebris and look it up, I find that the word tenebris comes from tenebra. So the noun is actually, it ends in a, the actual nominative form, tenebra. And I find that the ending in the genitive singular is ae. So what declension is tenebris? What declension is tenebris? First declension, very good. It ends in the genitive singular. It ends in ae. So it's a first declension noun. So you see, is the genitive singular ending for the third declension, but that has nothing to do with tenebris. Tenebris is first declension. So that's why it's important for us to know the rule, that you've got to look at the genitive singular form or you're going to get it wrong. So we see tenebris, and then Later in the line, we see tenebrae, and we understand what that is because tenebris comes from tenebra, and then here we see tenebrae, which is another form of tenebra, okay? And that's it for our nouns for this lesson. So quick yes or no. Do you see how to identify the 5 declensions of nouns? Yes or no? It should be pretty easy, all right? If you have a dictionary, you can use an online dictionary like Whitaker's Words, or you can use a printed dictionary. They both will tell you the same stuff. Whitaker's Words, the advantage of the online dictionary, that Whitaker's Words, is that you can enter any form of any Latin word into that dictionary, and it will figure out all of the possibilities for that form. So if you don't know what the nominative form is, you can't look it up in a dictionary. You can use an online dictionary like Whitaker's Words and just enter whatever the form is that you see, and it'll tell you what the nominative is. Or like we saw with facta, it'll give you all of the possible options. So you're still going to need to know grammar because you're going to need to figure out which one is the right option. But yeah, like Samuel said, it's much faster. It's very fast. But sometimes it's nice to just use a regular dictionary, okay? So that's that. That's the 5 Latin declensions and how you identify the 5 Latin declensions. So as you go on in Latin reading, what I'd like to challenge you to do from now on, because now you can't play dumb anymore. You can't say you don't understand these things. Now you know. So now you're accountable to this knowledge. So what I'd like you to do in Latin reading from now on, whenever you see a substantive noun, I'd like you to figure out what declension it belongs to, okay? Take a minute and figure out what declension it belongs to. So let's just see another example. Let's go to lesson 2. Give me a minute to open this here. And I know we're running out of time, Grace. Give me a minute. Okay. In Latin reading 2, we have different nouns. So we can, practice some new stuff. We have homo, which we already saw. We have the form deo. We have nomen. We have Ioannes, testimonium, lumine. So you can see a whole new list of nouns, and you can practice identifying which declension each noun belongs to. Now, again, the reason why that's important, right? Who cares, right? Why are you bothering us with this talk about declensions? The reason why this is important is because when we learn all the forms of the nouns, the forms are going to be different for each declension. And in order to figure out the form, the first thing you're going to have to figure out is what declension is it, okay? So being able to identify the declension is the first step in figuring out the form or figuring out the translation, all right? So today's lesson, the 5 declensions of Latin nouns. I think that that's pretty clear. Most of you either already kind of know that or studied it in another book or something like that. If it's all new to you, I still think it's pretty easy to follow, but make sure you're studying lesson 3 in Latin grammar. As we go through these lessons, work on them while we go through them, and they'll be very easy. They can be challenging by yourself, but if we go through them together, they'll be very easy. And get these lessons done as we go along. So that's all for today. 5 Latin declensions for nouns. If you've got any questions, I'll hang out for a bit, but otherwise you're free to go if you promise to work on these Latin grammar lessons, okay? So make sure you're working on these lessons on your own, get these lessons done, and I'll help you go through this whole Latin grammar course, okay? Because we'll make it easy together. All right, so that's all for today. You're free to go if you're all done. I'll see you next week or whenever our next meeting is. If you've got any questions, you can just post them in the chat and I'll answer them for the next few minutes. All right, God bless everybody. Take care.